Hi, this is Joanne in Antigua, and I thought I'd switch things up a bit in this video by shooting outside in my garden. Since we're here in the Caribbean and we can have all this natural sunlight and this very loud breeze, I thought I'd take advantage of it to share my Black History Month project, which has been sharing a book a day across my social media. Just as a reminder, I am Jo Hadley on Instagram, on Twitter, and I am Antiguan writer here on YouTube, Jo Hadley on Facebook, or Joanne C. Hillhouse. Okay, so I did a book a day, and I'm a little bit give or take at the halfway point, so I thought I'd just do a quick run through of the books that I have spotlighted. It's basically just sharing a book and sharing a little excerpt from my review of the book, because I'm only sharing books that I have actually reviewed. The wind is picking up. So let's go. My first book was Like the Singing Coming Off the Drums by Sonia Sanchez. And I said of this, what strikes me is the brevity of the language and the way she efficiently and beautifully blends and confuses the senses and gets to the heart of the matter. I remember this book very fondly, very musicality to it. It's a poetry collection. That was the first one, Like the Singing Coming Off the Drums by Sonia Sanchez. The second book is the first of a trilogy. I haven't read the other books in the trilogies yet, but I'm very interested in reading them. And it is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin is speculative fiction. N.K. Jemisin, like Sonia Sanchez, these are Black American writers. N.K. Jemisin's book really intrigued me and really kind of primed me to read more in the series. One of the things I said in my review was the book handles its shifting tone well. A certain sex scene comes to mind. It really works because of how well the characters have been defined. Oh, and the writing is delicious. All these reviews, by the way, you can read in full on my johadley.wordpress.com blog, or just search Jo Hadley online and you'll find me. And it's in the series Blogger and Books, where I talk about books that I've read. Next book brought it right back home here to Antigua. It's a collection that I'm included in. It's called So the Nailhead Bend, So the Story End. It's edited by Althea Prince, who is an Antiguan writer resident in Canada. And it is a collection that introduces a whole bunch of the newer Antiguan and Barbudan writers, and also some veterans as well. And it's a really good collection. And my next book was Back to America, An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. It was an Oprah's book club pick. Now, my favorite Tayari still remains The Silver Sparrow, but I really think An American Marriage is a book of this moment that we're in. And I think I said as much in the excerpt that I quoted in my share. It's a timely read as an indictment of America's prison industrial complex and its hunger for Black lives. That's what I said. So, An American Marriage. I read this actually as an audiobook, and anyone who follows me knows that I'm not a huge fan of audiobooks because I get distracted very easily. But this one, it took a while because of that, but I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the multiple perspectives it gave to this moment and to this crisis of Black bodies in prison, sometimes, often unjustly. And the next one I did was, one of mine. Do I have it here? I did Dancing Nude in the Moonlight. I said when I started this series that I was going to be sharing my work as well. So Dancing Nude in the Moonlight was one of mine that I shared, and I quoted from a review that I found on Amazon about the book. And the review said, it's the reader review, said, "Why it took me so long to read some of Joanne's work, I don't know. Perhaps when you live on a small island, you're too busy looking out to see what's under your nose. But her writing rings so true for someone who has spent a good part of her life in Antigua." Through that, I found myself saying, first as I read Dancing Nude in the Moonlight, and again, even more so when I read other writings, even though the dialect sometimes got away from me. Time for a collected works of Joanne Hillhouse, I think, with lots of her short stories that might keep you awake at night, and more of her poems, so spiritually worded but so powerful. Thank you for that. That's really, really deeply appreciated. What the reviewer here is referring to in terms of the other writings is that this collection is the 10th anniversary edition of a book that was actually my second book ever published, Dancing Nude in the Moonlight. And the 10th anniversary collection includes the original novella and other writings, that is, short stories and poems, and some nonfiction, which have been previously published in journals and anthologies, and some new writing as well. So I really appreciate the shout out there from that reviewer. The next book or set of books that I shared were the Bert Award books. Now, between 2014 and 2019, the Bert Award ran in the Caribbean, organized by the Bocas Literary Festival and sponsored by the Code, in a nonprofit in Canada, and named for the financier, the person who supported the fund, to amplify voices from sort of marginalized groups, including the prize. They had a version of the prize in Africa, they had a version of the prize among First Nations people in Canada, and of course you had Caribbean books. And it was books focused at the teen and young adult Caribbean market. That's where my book Musical Youth came from. My book Musical Youth was one of the first finalists in the Bert Award. But you have so many other books. Home Home by Lisa Allen Agostini, Children of the Spider by Imam Baksh. Those are some of my favorites. I'm not going to try to go through all of them because then I'm going to forget someone, but all those books are amazing. Different genres, different styles, different voices. Not all Black, because the Caribbean is not all Black. We have a multiplicity of cultures, ethnicities, and races, and so all of that is represented in this series. The next one I did was Joel Parker Rhodes' Black Brother, Black Brother. Black Brother, Black Brother is a story that deals with, it's a coming of age sort of story. Two brothers, one white presenting, one sort of black presenting, but brothers, family bonded, and one, the darker skinned one, going through the difficulties of dealing with colorism and dealing with acceptance and self-identity and all of that. So I suppose my first note is that the teen drama featuring two mixed race brothers, one black presenting, one white presenting, is a quick read. It drops you right into the book's central conflict from the first scene, the fault line between whiteness and blackness, and the resulting quakes caused by anti-blackness. And this book was also an audiobook, and I really, really enjoyed it. It was actually my quickest read of the past year. I finished it practically overnight. Really, really good read. And then my next book that I shared on my social media, I think I have the hard copy here, was this one, London Rocks by Brenda Lee Brown. Brenda Lee Brown is British of Antiguan descent, resident in Antigua, and London Rocks is the story of British youth, Black British youth, dealing with a lot of the same issues of anti-blackness and, coming of age, identity, but also set to the rhythms and the music of that brought them together. So really, really musical book, really moving book, and really sort of riveting main character in Dante. My next one love this one. This one is an international pick. It's Noah, as Trevor Noah's Born a Crime. I almost said Trevor Noah's sort of Patricia because that's the name of his last comedy special. But it's basically the story of his coming of age as a colored youth in South Africa. Colored was a specific designation given to people like him who were mixed race, white and black. And also, I found really of the bond between him and his mother. And I think the excerpt that I pulled was about his mother in my review. She is very familiar. She's African, and the women I grew up knowing are African Caribbean, but they have in common a particular strain of strength and resilience, and manage to regard the fact that their life is more struggle than not, with a mix of humor and resolve. The fact that they don't bemoan their existence but push through it. Well, I can only aspire to have half their strength. And so that's what I said about Trevor Noah, Born a Crime. By the way, check out Son of Patricia. It's a really, really funny comedy special. My next one is by a writer from Dominica. I don't know if I'm saying this word right, but it's Wabanchek, and it's the sort of Aboriginal, the Amerindian name for hurricane. And it's a poetry collection that deals with the aftermath of Hurricane Maria in Dominica, Very, very heartrending, very, very moving, very vivid accounting of that experience. Let me see what I said. The collection is tonally an emotional roller coaster. What did I say? Its imagery is precise and evocative. Its energy and word flow, use of symbolism, um, anthropomorphism, allusions, its play on words, uh, just everything kind of add weight and sort of groundedness to the story, and also beauty and magic and all of that. It's really a riveting collection. And one of the first that I read about 2017, that was a horrible season of hurricanes for the Caribbean, and this book is one of the first that I read that captures that. And the next one, day 11, was To Shoot Hard Labor. This is a memoir, The Life of an Antiguan Working Man. It's set in Antigua, obviously. It's a sort of a post-slavery narrative dealing with Antigua, almost 100 years of Antiguan history, from post-slavery to the early 1980s, to the lived life of this man known as Papa Sammy Smith. And if you want to know that history, you can't do better than this book, To Shoot Hard Labor. I then shared another one of mine, Musical Youth. Musical Youth is that Bert Award book that I mentioned, and I shared a quote. This review actually meant a lot to me. It's from a former professor of mine from the University of the West Indies, Professor Caroline Cooper, and it reads, "I've just this minute finished reading Musical Youth. It's absolutely brilliant. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. I think it should be read by young adults across the Caribbean. The themes are so powerful." I thank her so much for that. Themes in the book include colorism and identity. One of the things I loved is that this book actually, which started out as a Bert Award winning book, in December of 2020, was named one of Kirkus Review's top indie books of the year, one of his top teen young adult books, and one of his top romances. And one of the things, the star review that I got from Kirkus spoke to was how joyful of a book it was. And that's the other thing I want to emphasize. So it deals with these heavy themes. It is these kids, and it is them in their space, enjoying each other, discovering themselves, discovering their talents, discovering their skills. And I had so much fun writing them. So the next book that I shared is one that I'm actually now getting ready to read the audiobook for. I've read chapters of the audiobook, and I'm now getting ready to read the whole thing. My camera is not behaving because of this wind. I'm getting ready to read the whole thing, and it's a Barbadian book by Shakira Bourne, In Time of Need, and it's funny as hell. That's the first thing. It works really well as an audiobook. The audiobook was released on Valentine's Day. It works really well as an audiobook, and it's also so poignant in terms of its characterizations, in terms of its handling of Caribbean life in a way that's grounded in truth, but also grounded in the absurd. It's a really good read. And so far, I'm finding with the audiobook a really good listen as well. Okay, the environment is not cooperating, so I'm getting ready to wrap up. The next one that I shared is by Eric Jerome Dickey. Rest in peace to him. Eric Jerome Dickey was one of the sort of shocks of January in terms of how many people we lost. That is so important to the culture in such a short space of time. And I'm speaking of entertainment and media, and I'm also speaking of the Black community, African American, African Caribbean. So many talents have been lost in such a short space of time, and Eric Jerome Dickey was one. He died in early January, and he's actually one of the few Black writers to have contributed to the big Marvel machine, because he wrote one of the Black Panther Storm crossovers. He wrote Prelude to the Wedding of the Century, and I shared that one on Valentine's Day because I thought, why not an epic love story by one of the masters of Black love for that day of love? And so I shared Prelude to the Wedding of the Century, which is sort of an origin story for both Aurora and T'Challa, and it's about how they met and how they fell in love. And it has a lot of action, and it has a lot of youthful angst and all that stuff, and also some bigger themes about exploitation of the African continent. So beautiful, beautiful story, well told. Okay, and then I have this one is from an author who lives in the US but is from Trinidad, and it's called Greyborn Rising, and the author's name is Derry Sandy. This one has actually got a very hyped up response from my followers because the cover, literally, I'll try to post the cover somewhere, I'll link it. It's a man with a cutlass and a woman with a cross, like a necklace, and that kind of sets it up. It's totally speculative fiction, but it's so Caribbean grounded. It has a lot of basically all of the mythology and all of the lore that I grew up reading and hearing about in oral, because we're very rich on the oral tradition in the Caribbean. We don't write these stories down a lot, except perhaps in the Nancy stories, and he has all of them. He threw the kitchen sink at this plot. It's like, you want a sukuya? Here's two. You want a jobless? Here's three. So basically everything you can think of, and yet it doesn't feel too much. It feels like, yes, the action is ramped up. Yes, there's some shadow around every corner, but it makes sense, and it's very vivid, and you can see it, and it moves, and the stakes are really high. Um, Let me see what I said. I said I hardly know where to start, right? Maybe with the good people who make up the uneasy alliance of heroes, the remaining members of a decimated house in a very old order, secret society stuff, watching and guarding like the Watchers of Highlander, or the Talamaska from Anne Rice, a Sukuya, an apprentice Sukuya, a shapeshifter of some sort, a clairvoyant, dog and dog-like beings, an underworld king, a university student with the gift of tapping into whatever supernatural power she needs, a child ghost, another child ghost, a former trans prostitute come vampire, some machine gun wielding human, a dead opium man, and former enslaved man. That's just some of the people and other beings in this fast-paced, high-stakes novel. There's also a sentient house. So that's a little excerpt from my review of this book. It's one of my favorite reads of 2020. And I think, yes, this is the last one. This is a children's book. And this is part of the Collins Big Cat series of books. The Collins Big Cat series of books is a book of international titles for children. And recently, Collins has decided to order some Caribbean titles, some own voices, Caribbean titles. So they're using Caribbean writers and Caribbean illustrators. And my book, The Jungle Outside, is one of the first. And if I was any kind of good self-promoting author, I would have a copy here with me, but I don't. And another one that came out in January, one of the first titles to come out, is Turtle Beach by Barbara Andrea Arundel with illustrator Xavier Archibald. If you watched my video on Book Chat, you would have seen us talking about these books, and I'll actually put the link for that as well. The illustrations are so magical and yet so grounded in sort of Caribbean as seen through the eyes of a Caribbean artist, which makes a difference. It might not sound like it would, but it makes a difference. And then, of course, the story is very eco-friendly. It has to do with hatching turtles and what humans can do to ensure that their mad dash towards life is not obstructed. So it's a very simple tale. It's Anais on her birthday. And what did I write? I wrote in a children's book. In a children's book, in a children's book, children should get to see themselves, dream, feel joy, and an untitled beach on Anais' birthday, on the occasion of the hatching of hundreds of new life, there is that. And that's where I'll end with this sort of, I don't know what to call it, a video share of my Black History Month project, which so far has included 15 titles, and I hope to continue a book a day till the end of the month. I hope you'll check out these books. These are books by people, these are books by Black voices from Africa, from America, from Canada, from the Caribbean. Voices that need to be heard, not just in February, but year round.